各位，前美国商务部长雷蒙多罕见地用一种既佩服又忧虑的语气谈到了中国的产业政策。他开门见山地说，比亚迪的车很好开，华为的技术令人难以置信。这些评价并非恭维，而是点出他真正要讨论的核心，那就是中国依靠政府补贴、体系化投资与人才的培养，已经在电动车、通信、生物科技等关键领域形成了领先的优势。他提醒大家，中国在全球范围内推进职业教育，建立上千所技术学校，并把资源精准地投入战略产业。而美国的劳动体系却是相对的混乱，大量的年轻人被鼓励上大学，却缺乏实际的技能。生物科技、制造业等领域的人才平均年龄偏高，缺乏新生力量。如果我们想领跑生物科技，却在高中都不教分子生物学，这是美国无法忽视的结构性弱点。谈到半导体和关键矿物，他更是直言不讳。美国过去为了利润外移生产链，最终让 AI 芯片100%的依赖台湾，让印刷电路板和核心材料几乎全部依赖海外。这不仅削弱制造能力，也把国家安全置于风险之中。他承认，芯片法案是美国为弥补失误的被动举措。问题不是美国缺乏创新，而是缺乏完整的产业链。然而，在制造业是否应该回流美国这个问题上，他之前就与拜登总统存在明显的分歧。总统坚持我们要在美国制造一切，但他认为现实是美国劳动力远远不足以承担全产业链本土化，强行回流会提高成本，导致通胀，最后由普通消费者买单。如果在美国制造婴儿汽车座椅，你得付$600。这是他举出的典型例子。在某些战略产业，如芯片、电池、航空、部分药物成分，美国不能100%依赖中国。美国过去一直补贴农业、航空业，而产业政策又不是新鲜事，只是现在轮到了高科技。这一场争论的难点在于，哪一个领域需要靠市场，哪一些需要靠政策。美国内部对此并没有共识。而关税是否有效，他认为关税难以取消，一旦落地就会变成政治的符号。提高钢铁税听起来像是保护工人，但美国使用钢材的行业比生产钢材的行业多几十倍，最终受伤的有可能是更广泛的制造业和消费者。国家安全确实需要制造业，但制造业不是越多越好，而是要做对的东西。他的总结耐人寻味，中国之所以强，不只是在补贴，而是把产业、技术、人才与国家目标绑在一起。美国必须决定是继续依靠市场自然调节，还是学习对手更系统的工业思维呢？这才是竞争真正底层的问题。让我们来看一下视频。
China has a massively effective industrial policy. I mean, as I just said, I think it's amazing. It's stunning. I mean, anyone that's been in a BYD car, it's a gorgeous car. Works really well. It's a beautiful thing. That's a direct result of Chinese, subsidy. Look at Huawei. Incredible. People in the government in the 2 administrations ago thought they were going to hobble Huawei. Come back stronger than ever, making incredible chips. All because it's a champion company in the Chinese government. The list goes on. Biotechnology. I mean, they're really innovating in biotech, in quantum, because the government is pouring money into it like crazy. Also, another thing, a lesson that we could learn from China, they invest in the talent. China recently rolled out, I forget the exact number, but thousands of what we would call career and technical vocational schools. Like, the average age of a pharmaceutical worker in America is like 55. The average age of a plumber, welder, electrician is 50-something. which now that I'm 54 sounds young, but we don't have an effective workforce system in this country. We don't. We incentivize attendance, Pell Grants, GI Bill, incentivize attendance. We send everybody to college. Lots of people don't graduate, or they graduate and they don't have skills for a job. China is incredibly intentional about a workforce strategy. We don't even teach molecular biology in most high schools, and yet we want to lead the world in biotech. So I think there's a lot we can learn from them. My only point is that under the current President Xi's leadership, it's a less free country and a much greater adversary to the United States, which I think is regrettable. There are some experts here in rare earths. We just rode the elevator together. 40, 50 years ago, the US led the world in global manufacturing of semiconductors. We made some of the components. We made printed circuit boards in America. We mined in America. We had rare earth minerals and we were mining. And we took our eye off the ball. In pursuit, the market said, pursue profit, pursue fatter margins, pursue efficiency at all cost. So that's what happened. And as a result, we woke up a few years ago realizing that 100% of every AI chip is made in Taiwan. It's utterly frightening. And by the way, you try to find a printed circuit board made in America, or a substrate, or a chemical, or certain forms of packaging. You can't do it, and it's dangerous. So we decided in that example, where national security was at stake, we had to intervene, and we did.
So you made a careful case for industrial policy, and there are a lot of economists who don't like industrial policy, but I think even the ones who don't like industrial policy would probably like the case that you just made. But the case is often made, and was sometimes made by the Biden administration, that manufacturing was good. That it was just really good to be manufacturing things, and that having a big manufacturing sector was really an important thing for a country, and that a country should focus on having a big, strong manufacturing sector for the sake of having a big, strong manufacturing sector, including the possibility that you might be able to convert it into doing military things if you had a war. But there was an argument that sort of manufacturing in general was a good thing that should be focused on. Is that your view?
Yeah, that is not my view. And I'm smiling because I would talk to the president about this. I don't know if Jake Sullivan's still here, but this is an argument that I routinely lost with President Biden. The argument will go something like this. Hey, Gov, which is what he called me. Gov, I'm sick of America being at the end of the supply chain. Why can't we make everything in America? Why can't we make bicycles and backpacks in America? I would say, Mr. President, we don't have enough labor. It's not, a good at which we have an advantage in making. It's not critical to our national security. By the way, if we try to make everything in America and we don't have the capacity or the labor, inflation will go through the roof. And at that time, and still, we have a problem with inflation. He would say, essentially, I don't agree with you. I want to make more. I want to make everything in America. And so, the argument would go as such. It turns out I lost every time because I wasn't the boss. And today you have somebody else in the White House who I think would also say he wants to make everything in America. I don't agree, by the way. I'm not going to get into the long list of things I don't agree with the current inhabitant of the Oval Office on, but I don't see a competitive advantage for us in making car seats for babies. I was with Doug McMillan recently at Walmart. He's like, it's just really hard to make these car seats in America for all these reasons. Trump is like insisting we make them in America. He said, fine, if you want me to do that, when the average mom or dad goes to Walmart, they're going to pay $600 for a car seat. I don't think that helps America. But there's no national security benefit for making car seats in America. I think by and large, we want the market to work. We want to specialize in what we are better at. And by the way, we want higher paying jobs. We want to, we want to make higher value things and higher paying jobs in America. But anyway, so that is my view.
How about, so no baby seats, no backpacks, no shirts?
Unless we could do it better, cheaper,
Right, but
faster.
but we shouldn't tilt the playing field towards doing those things.
Yeah, fine. The argument would be it's similar to the semiconductor argument, or actually what's happening right now in biotechnology. Once China decides that it's going to dominate the market in solar panels, the cells that go into solar panels, EV batteries, active pharmaceutical ingredients, it becomes almost impossible for anyone else to make them. So if you believe that these things are good for America, good for our economy, good for national security, good for our society, that in order to compete with that, you don't want to have to depend on them for 100% of those fill in the blank. So you want them to be made in America, so we don't have to rely on a critical thing, 100% from China. So putting a thumb on the scale. By the way, listen, I'm the one that did industrial policy, and I'm the one who said to you it's really hard to do. I'm the one that fielded many phone calls from senators, from the White House, from congresspeople, from governors in swing states. You've got to do this, you've got to do that. And I try to shield my team, say no to the things I thought were bad investments. It is really hard. That being said, we've subsidized the airline industry forever. It's not that new that the US government has put a thumb on the scale in favor of industries that we thought were important, farming, et cetera. So I think it's a little dishonest to say this is a brand new thing. I'm not saying you're saying that, but I heard that from a lot of people when I was trying to get votes for the CHIPS Act. And by the way, I heard that from a lot of conservative, Midwestern senators who'd be the first to vote for a farm bill and against chips, even though every chip in a quantum computer that the United States government is making, satellite equipment, drones, all the military equipment, CIA equipment, all made in Taiwan.
What would you have thought if the locus of global semiconductor production was kind of heavily in the Channel Islands or in Europe?
Yeah, look, in that instance, it's not nearly as urgent, but still urgent, because were there to be a hurricane in the Channel Islands, we'd be in big trouble. But maybe a good example for that is there's a company in the Netherlands called ASML. They make gigantic pieces of semiconductor equipment to do lithography, like as big as this room. And they're essentially the only company in the world that can make the most advanced of those machines. There's a company in Tokyo that has similar, but not quite as good, some other companies in the US. But ASML in the Netherlands, only in the Netherlands, can make this mother of a machine that nobody else can make, and you need it to make leading edge chips, AI chips. That is a problem. That is a vulnerability. Something happens to the ASML facilities, I don't know, someone takes over the Netherlands. Seriously, there could be an outbreak in the Netherlands. During COVID, we had so many problems with packaging plants in Malaysia. We ought to be focused on that. We ought to be doing something about that. But what's not nearly as urgent when you have the current president of China saying, we will reunite with Taiwan. And I think they will. And it's literally just a matter of time. I'll say a few things about this. Listen, both presidents, Biden and Trump, are not wrong that the way free trade played out hurt a lot of Americans and crushed certain regions of this country. Now, I don't my own view is that that's not an argument against trade so much as it is an argument for truly free trade with countries that play by the rules and some genuine support to retrain, redeploy people who lost their job, which we didn't do. And so it's out of that desire, like that, when you go to these communities where I've been, like, it is horrible. Like, to see empty building after empty building and the rate of opioid deaths, it's, you know, you can't not want to do something, and tariffs make those imports more expensive. So President Biden kept a number of the tariffs. I think out of that instinct, I want to be on the side of the American worker. You know, I'm not doing anything that puts even one American steel worker or manufacturing worker out of a job. I'm sticking up for the American worker. That was the reason to keep the tariffs in place. That's, you know, that's the theory. And like I say, in a way, that makes sense. But I just think that there are better ways to incentivize high-end manufacturing in the United States that will create better, higher-paying jobs for Americans than to simply say, you know, put a blanket tariff on every commodity that's coming in from China, which basically just is a tax on consumers who go to Walmart and pay $500 for a baby seat. The thing that I will also say, since this is a political, you know, Institute of Politics kind of event or political place, man, it's tough to take it. If you're a politician, it's tough to take a tariff off once it's on. You're going to be the one that says, I'm not sticking up for the American worker. Go ahead, flood the market with cheap imports. That's a tough political decision.
If I can just add one thing, depends on exactly how you do the numbers, but there are on the order of 100 times more people who work in industries that use steel as there are in industries that there are producing steel. As a calibration, the manicure industry is about 6 times as large as the steel industry in the United States. And so when you raise the price of steel, you have to think very hard about what you're doing to the aggregate number of manufacturing jobs, and you may often be reducing that number rather than increasing it. So some of these tariff policies are, I would argue, misguided, even if you accepted the premise that maximizing manufacturing employment was the right thing to do.
I think, can I just quickly respond to that? I think, so the thing that I really tried to pound the table on and was not successful was, let's not tariff inputs that come from China that go into things that we're trying to manufacture in America. So a lot of inputs, for example, that come from China that go into a component, you know, that might go into an American car. And I say, Mr. President, we want to make more cars in America. It makes it more expensive to make the car in America. Exactly your point. But once again, it's very hard to take a tariff off. The difference between manufacturing and manicurists, no disrespect to manicurists, because that's an awesome thing to do, manufacturing does lead to research and development, which leads to more manufacturing, which leads to more research and development, which leads to more innovation. So there's lots of good reasons to think we want more manufacturing. And also steel, you can't be a strong country without some steel industry. And right now in this country, we have a single aluminum smelter left and a very dwindling steel industry. So once again, back to national security.
Wait, I can't resist. This is the first thing you've said that I've actually disagreed with.
Oh.
Only one. But it's the first thing you said that I disagreed with.
What?
If we imported all our steel, and we imported it from 15 different countries around the world,
But
and
we
took
don't.
steel and we fashioned it into a thing, why isn't steel like cotton? I mean, I don't.
Fine,
why-
I'll give you that.
I mean, you said if we don't have a steel industry,
Okay, fine. But listen, but here's what I would say. That isn't the case.
pretty close in the case of steel. In the case of lots of things, you can argue that there's a point of vulnerability. But Canada, England, there are a lot of places we get steel from. You
If
really want to
I
argue
could-
that we're vulnerable because we don't produce enough domestic steel?
If I could be convinced that steel were truly as commoditized as cotton and were truly available from enough other countries, and that we could sufficiently spool it up, like if it were a commodity and we needed it in a time of war, then I would be with you.